Welcome to episode 63.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
Finally, warmer weather is here, and there is no better time than right now to book your vacation getaway with 3D Travel Company. Head on over to our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button on the left-hand side. They give a complimentary quote so you can get an idea of what it will cost to take your summer vacation. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips, booked and traveled by the end of 2017. Hurry and book today so you can travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey you guys, this is a special shout out to all my listeners around the world. Who Did That Voice is now heard in over 78 different countries, and I can't thank you guys enough. Here in the USA and abroad, thank you for listening to Who Did That Voice. Keep listening and sharing with your friends. Hey all you Marvel and Spider-Man fans out there, Who Did That Voice is doing an entire month with cast and crew from the 1994 Spider-Man the Animated Series, which aired on Fox Kids. You won't want to miss the month of June on Who Did That Voice. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest voiced Michael Morbius, who later becomes a vampire bat through genetic mutation on the 1994 Spider-Man the Animated Series.
I had thought you would be my main competition, Parker, but you will be lucky to make it to the starting line.
Don't forget, Michael, the tortoise beat the hare.
In my country, we eat tortoises.
Peter!
Hi, Felicia.
Felicia, what a splendid name. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Michael Morbius.
Uh-huh, charmed. Please excuse us. What B movie did he come from?
The Revenge of Dracula's Ego.
A bat!
Yes, I am studying them. This one must have gotten loose.
What kind are they?
Vampires?
Vampires? Don't they feed on...
Yes, but of small animals only. Not people, like in the movies. Relax, my princess. I would never let anything harm you.
You, I believe, Michael. It's them I don't trust.
These numbers, they make no sense. What is causing them? No! No! Get out of there! No! Let go! My hand! Pain! Personal science log. The bite from the bat somehow made me feel stronger. I feel energy surging through me. I can hear every heartbeat around me, and I can defy gravity. Incredible. No! My face, skin, translucent, mesostructure distorted. I have got to reverse this. There is something else. I feel a hunger.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show I have Nick Jameson joining me. Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Well, Nick, the very first thing we like to do when we get to know a special guest for the first time is just to find out a little bit about them. So who was Nick, the young boy that grew up into the man he is today, and how did you get into acting, and more specifically voice acting?
Well, I started off in music. I did music from a very young age. Then I would say I guess it was about, how long ago was it? Back in 1989, I think, I started doing voiceover. I had a friend who did it, and it just sounded fun. There was a whole series of life reasons why I needed to make money right then, and that seemed like a good way to do it. So that's how that happened, and then voiceover led to doing acting and improv comedy and all kinds of things. It just sort of all merged into one thing.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And how did you end up getting to where you're living currently, and where is that exactly, Nick?
I live in Reykjavik in Iceland, and I came here, I guess, the first time about 5 years ago. and just fell in love with it. And I just kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And then one night I just decided, I want to live here. I just like it here, and make everything else work. So I did. It's kind of an unusual way to move somewhere, but there wasn't really any ulterior motive. I just liked the place.
That's awesome. What is it? Just the scenery, the people, or kind of a culmination of everything, or?
It's everything. It's hard to put my finger on. I just have a connection with the place. It's very largely the lifestyle of just living in a very small town that's also a city.
Yeah.
You meet your friends all the time. You can get together. You can walk everywhere, but still you have tons of restaurants and coffee shops and music venues. Huge creative community. There's just lots going on here. So it's just my day-to-day life is just really much better here than it's ever been anywhere else.
That's wonderful to hear. I know I was just talking with someone the other day about Reykjavik, Iceland. We were talking about, I'm forgetting the show. It was a Nick Jr. show that they did there. Lazy Town, I believe, is the one it was called.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a big show here. Yeah.
So we were talking about that the other day, and I was like, no way, I'm actually talking to a guy from Iceland like in a couple days. So it was kind of crazy that we were chatting about Iceland. But I think it's awesome that you've been able to move abroad and find a lifestyle that fits for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nick, the very first thing we're going to really dive in today is Spider-Man. It's the topic of the month. We're talking to cast members and people who've been involved with the cast. And you played Michael Morbius, I think he was Romanian student. And then also Richard Fisk, which I didn't realize that until doing the research for this interview, who was the Kingpin's son. And Roscoe Lee Brown voiced the Kingpin and sadly has passed. But what was it like for you being a part of the Spider-Man show and playing those two big iconic characters?
Well, it was a great show. It's unusual in that there were some of the regular voiceover gang there. But the director, I think his name was Tony Pastor. Am I getting it right? Or why do I hear that? Tony Pastor, Tony Shepard. But he was a sort of, I think, a theater director originally, and he wanted to get all his favorite actors in there. So he would get these, guys like Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., Jeff Corey. We had Martin Landau in there. Just a lot of really interesting actors. And, Roscoe Lee Brown. I mean, he's not a guy you usually see on cartoons.
Yeah.
And he was great. I sat next to him in all the sessions we worked together. We used to quote Shakespeare back and forth at each other and stuff. He was a great guy. And I met a lot of really interesting people that way. I think Martin Landau came in the day he was nominated for Ed Wood.
Oh, wow.
And he's sitting around the lobby telling jokes and stuff. It was unusual. I mean, most voiceover is done with a group that, of people that do it all the time. But while there were some people like that there were just a lot of interesting actors, people that you'd seen, especially older folks that you had seen forever and ever and ever, or hadn't seen for a while. John Ashton from or Aston, is it, from Addams Family, and just interesting people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you, speaking with you today, I wasn't sure if you actually had an accent or not. Where did Michael Morbius's accent come from? Was that something that was directed or that you came up with on your own?
I came up with on my own, and I don't really remember it, honestly. I don't remember what the details of. I remember that it was kind of Slavic. I don't remember that it was Romanian, but...
It may not have been Romanian, but it was from kind of somewhere in that part of the world.
Yeah. I honestly don't remember what country I modeled it on, but it was definitely a Slavic accent. Yeah. And I did that because it was in the script that he was from that part of the world. So.
Well, he was such a unique character and then ended up, getting mutated by Spider-Man's blood to become a vampire. And then later on, fights with Blade, the vampire hunter, and Black Cat, which was really cool to see his character kind of come back in the latter part of the show as it was kind of wrapping up. I'm glad they didn't just drop Michael Morbius when he became an actual vampire bat, not just a vampire, but they kind of, they fixed him genetically with the neogenics, got him back to his, vampire state, and then he started becoming a vampire slayer with Blade. And I thought that was really cool because I always loved Michael Morbius's accent, and he was never a bad guy. He was just a guy that ran into some bad luck, so.
Yeah. Now, who was the vampire hunter? That was Malcolm McDowell, wasn't it?
I don't recall. I'm blanking.
I mean, he was a vampire hunter. I remember when he came in, I don't know if he was the vampire hunter, but it was real interesting when he came in because, he's a great actor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then you got to play Richard Fisk, which was, a more sinister, and he definitely was an evil character. There was one episode in particular where a young man, I forget the character's name, saves you from a rack that's been pushed over by some other criminals and you're in prison, and he saves you, and the Kingpin gives him a suit of armor, and that episode was called The Prowler. It was kind of one of those things where, he thinks he's finally gotten the power he wanted, but ultimately Kingpin, betrays him. And that was kind of the stuff we would see from Richard Fisk as well, setting people up and kind of causing havoc in New York City as well.
Right.
But when I was doing all the research on you, Nick, the one thing that really sprung to mind and kind of blew me away was that you've played Darth Sidious and a number of Star Wars characters since late 80s, early 90s in video games, TV shows, and some other projects as well, I believe. But the one that I really gravitated towards was the Star Wars Clone Wars project that came out in 2003. Not to be confused with Star Wars The Clone Wars that came out in 2008. How did you get involved with that role? Was it because of your previous game work, or how did that all come about?
Yeah, it would have been the game work, I think, because I did do the Emperor Palpatine for a long, long time. I think that was the first thing it wasn't the first thing I did with LucasArts, but yeah, it was probably from that. I might have auditioned again. I don't remember. But I was definitely doing the games before.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe your first Star Wars character was, I think it's General Tarkin, I think is his name. I'm blanking out.
Might have, yeah, it's hard to remember. That was so long ago. And I've done so many of those Star Wars things. I don't exactly remember what the first, it's, the thing is with video games, because you're kind of jumping around dialogue wise, and, it's not like playing the game or something, there's just lines of dialogue. So it's kind of, it doesn't stick in your memory like making a movie or something does so much. So I don't remember the details of a lot of these things.
No, it's okay. Absolutely. Well, and then I know you actually got to come back on Star Wars The Clone Wars when they kind of revamped the series, and you actually played Darth Dinar, which was a slave world trader, and he was a pretty prominent character from his planet. And it was cool that you got to come back, but I never really understood why, or I don't know if do you know why they created two different Star Wars shows that were similar and called The Clone Wars, or?
Oh, gosh, I have no idea.
Okay.
I know some kind of business decision, probably.
Yeah.
I actually... was it from the same company, or was it?
I'm not sure. Originally, Cartoon Network, I believe, released the first one in 2003. And I think Cartoon Network still did release the one in 2008. But I think there was a little bit of a difference because the cast members for some of the voices were the same, and then some of them changed. I wasn't exactly sure why that had happened, and wondered if you knew, because your voice is Darth Sidious and Palpatine. And then also you played the main Techno-Union scientist on the original show back in 2003. I loved it because the animation was unique, and I'd always been like, where's the Clone Wars? Because, we got episode 2 where the Clone Wars start, episode 3, the Clone Wars are over. And the whole time, everything we've heard in 4, 5, and 6 was your father was the best pilot in the Clone Wars and Clone Wars this and that. And then we didn't even get to see him. So,
Yeah, that's odd. I don't know. I really don't know.
So your animation show was fantastic because it actually gave us the inside look into what the Clone Wars were, but in an animated version, which was fantastic. And the cast that you worked on with that was amazing as well. So.
Oh, yeah, sure. We had great people. Yeah, that was more of a traditional voiceover thing. It was a lot of the guys who normally do that. I remember Corey Burton was there, James Taylor. I think maybe Tom Kane did Yoda. But yeah, that was a funny. Kevin Michael Richardson, I remember, was on it.
Yeah.
Probably Rob Paulson was there. I'm not
I
sure.
believe he was. I believe he was. There were a lot of the mainstays that we see even today on animations. And with you moving to Reykjavik, have you kind of pulled away from that, or are you still acting or doing voice acting?
I don't do much of it. You know, it's funny because they do a lot of remote directing on these. Well, on the games they do. I think on animation shows they still want you to be there in the room. Although they rarely have everybody doing it at once like they used to. It's usually one at a time. But for some reason, I talked to my agent when I moved, and they said no, they kind of want you here. They're probably not going to call you very much. But I did do one project, Psychonauts 2, which I was really happy to do. I did that remote control from here. So there may be some more, but I still do acting and stuff. But it's not like I can fly to LA or New York to do a video game because it just doesn't pay enough to cover the expenses.
Yeah.
Whereas with a TV show or a movie, it would. So I'm not doing as much voiceover now, really.
Okay. Well, do you do any local acting there in Iceland, or?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I recently did a French TV show that was a lot of fun. And there's a lot going on here. I've been really focused on doing live comedy, stand-up comedy, and writing, and doing a lot of music and integrating music and comedy, doing one-man show kind of things. I recently did a one-man show at the International Reykjavik International Improv Festival that was all based on musical improv. So I'm doing stuff like that. I really haven't been pursuing the acting thing. I just wanted to take a little break from it.
Yeah.
I didn't consciously think that, but I realized that I just wasn't motivated to pursue it. But I am going to be. I got some meetings set up now, and I'm gonna this year I'm gonna sort of get back into it. And I am still auditioning for stuff in the States, sort of auditioning on my iPhone and stuff.
Well, that is exciting to know that you're still pursuing it, and kind of more so right now, revamping up to kind of pursue it more. Nick, when I was looking at your career, I was really astonished to see Lady and the Tramp 2: Scamp's Adventure from 2001. I was like, holy cow. I grew up loving the original one, Lady and the Tramp. And so to see that you were part of that sequel, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Michael Morbius played on Lady and the Tramp as Jim Deere.
Pretty different. Yeah. So, I think at the time I was doing Michael Morbius, or shortly after, I was doing Clifford the Big Red Dog, and you couldn't get much different than that. But my character on Clifford was Sheriff Lewis, just the nicest, sweetest guy, And of course, Jim Deere on Lady the Tramp.
Yeah.
Definitely not a bit fire.
Yeah, absolutely. For you, getting to work on that Disney title that, has such a warm place in many people's hearts, what was it like to come back and play on the sequel for that?
Well, let's see. How did we do that? I think that was like most Disney movies. We did it, one actor at a time in the studio.
Yeah.
Which most actors, myself included, don't like doing as much as being in the room, but it's more practical for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun. I don't remember a lot about it because, again, it was a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Jeff Bennett was in there. It was on that one. But yeah, it was a fun project. I think maybe Jamie Thomason directed it. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it was him, and he's always fun to work with. But yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. Well, Nick, do you have social media where people could reach out to you? Maybe they have questions about acting or voiceover, or just want to say hi. Do you have a way people can reach out to you?
Well, I have my personal Facebook page. I'm not really doing a super lot of fan stuff on it.
Okay.
I want to get a fan page going. I just haven't had time. I've been so slammed with other stuff. When people send me stuff, I do get back though. But if anybody wants to, follow my stuff on Facebook, my political rantings and whatever, and what I'm up to in Iceland, by all means, you can follow me on Facebook. I'm doing like several live shows a week, and there's a lot going on, and I talk a lot about what else is going on in Reykjavik, and there's really, really a lot of great stuff going on here.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Speaking of a lot of stuff going on there, tell me a little bit about TEDx.
Oh, TEDx, yeah. That was a lot of fun. I'd never done a TED event, and the theme was, I think it was global ideas applied locally or something like that, or local ideas applied globally. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was an interesting event. I didn't do a talk. I did 3 musical pieces. One was kind of a rap, like a sort of rap piece, a hip hop piece with a sung chorus. It was all done a cappella. And the other piece was like a bebop-y kind of thing, sung a cappella about all the wonderful things Iceland has to offer, done very tongue-in-cheek. For instance, suggesting that people should fight wars with rotten shark instead of guns, and things like that. And then I just did a straight-ahead ballad, one of my own songs, with an octave mandolin. And it was a good event. It really was a lot of different folks talking about different stuff. I think I was probably the only person doing music.
Well, that's most interesting that you were able to actually be a part of a TED conference or meeting, because I've always found them to be very fascinating. And I was just curious as to what you did. I had seen the picture with you with the mandolin, and I was just like, wow, that's really cool. I wonder what he was doing or presenting. So.
Yeah, well, that's what they asked me to do. I mean, if they'd asked me to do a talk, I certainly would have.
Yeah.
But I think the organizers saw me performing stand-up comedy, and they originally asked me if I did slam poetry, because they knew I rapped, because I did hip-hop shows too, and they saw me in some of those. And, to this day, I'm not really sure what slam poetry is. I'm more of a hip hop guy, so I just rap, I freestyle, I write stuff. But they came and saw me a few times. They saw me improvising music, and I was originally going to do that. But then the idea came that it would be more something written for something designed for the occasion. So rather than doing something improvised.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you were able to get to be a part of that. That's really awesome that they asked you to be a part, and that you got to play some musical pieces. I'm sure people were enjoying that immensely.
Yeah, it went over well. Yeah, the whole event went over well. It was funny. There was a nice sort of reception and stuff planned after it that I didn't get to go to, because I had to go shoot a TV show like right away. I had to leave the venue as soon as I got off stage, pretty much. But the whole thing was, Reykjavik's a great place for events like that, because it's such a tight community and you meet so many cool people, and everybody does the thing and then heads off to the nearest bar, which is probably going to be open until 4 a.m. and just
Nice.
It's a cool place to do stuff.
Well, those European countries, those countries from overseas, they just seem to have a different flair for life and for, hanging out at the bars and spending quality time together, which is really cool. And it's neat to find out that you've moved there because of such a great environment and a great lifestyle. And I think it's interesting. I've always loved living overseas. I used to travel a lot as a kid and lived overseas for a while. And I definitely know there's a huge difference between living in America and living overseas.
Yeah, I found, between living in Los Angeles and living in Reykjavik, it's huge because, you have to drive everywhere and you have to plan everything way ahead of time.
Yeah.
I've got tons of friends there that I go for years without seeing them, and here, I don't know, I've got more friends here than I do in LA, and I've only been here a couple of years. You just meet so many people, like 250 friends here.
Wow.
And, I see a lot of them every day. I see a lot of them very regularly. It is a different lifestyle, and to me, what you do during the hours of your day is what it's all about, so I that's why on this move I put just lifestyle first and how I'm going to make work happen second. I'd been doing stuff long enough. I knew I'd find a way to make stuff work, but I wanted the quality time. I wanted my days to be spent the way I want them, interacting with other artists, interacting with my friends, performing live, and being able to just jump across the street and see somebody else perform live. It's kind of like New York if you squished it down into 10 blocks or so. It's got that kind of pace. It's got that kind of not pace. It's not a frantic place, but it's got that kind of thing where you can just bounce from one thing to the other, which is really hard to do in LA.
Yeah.
not only because of the distance and the traffic, but the hours. It's not a late night city, and everything is just kind of disconnected.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. The next thing I want to ask is, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's looking at joining this crazy world of acting and performing, and or maybe trying to break into voiceover? What kind of advice would you have for them, Nick?
Well, the voiceover game is different than when I started out, I'm sure. In fact, I know it is. But I guess in general, the one, people do ask me that a lot, like hey, I want to do voiceover, how do I get into it?
Yeah.
People say the number one requirement is that you just love it. You really are passionate about it, and you're willing to work at it. Because if you don't really super love it, you won't work hard enough to be as good as the people you're competing with. And they are very, very good. That's one reason. Like people who do, the voiceovers are a relatively small community compared to acting, because you can have one guy do so many things, especially like in animation or games. You have guys that do multiple voices, multiple dialects, impressions, voice matches, their own characters, whatever. They walk around with a repertoire in their head. And so you got to be able to do that too. They're not going to hire you because you have a unique look or usually even because you have a unique voice. So that happens sometimes. There are some guys that have a quirky voice or particularly mellifluous voice that'll work a lot. But it's mostly, I would say mostly make sure you love it enough to really work hard enough to be competitive. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get to where you want to go.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for giving us that piece of advice. And, I really, from doing this show, as long as I've been doing it, Nick, I would say that is absolutely true. You have to absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that you love voiceover and pursue it no matter what, because if not, you won't get anywhere.
Yeah, it's very competitive. It's, there are specific things you want to do. Once you get good, once you get good enough to make a demo reel, you want to do that to show people what you can do. And then you want to get an agent. And so those are practical things you can do. If you're living in a place like LA or New York or Chicago, there's workshops you can take to learn more about it. There's probably lots of resources online, I'm guessing, because there is for everything now. So that's probably an option. There's good books written about it. Like when I started out, there were books at the time, tapes or CDs that accompanied them. I didn't do a lot of that stuff, but I know it was there. I kind of been doing voices all my life just as a goof, and I've definitely been doing dialects a lot. I kind of took that seriously even before there was any reason for me to do it.
Yeah.
That's always been something I'm pretty strong at. But, I think most people who get into this already are doing it before they start doing it, if you know what I mean. They play with it. It's something they love to do, and it's fun, and they goof around at parties or, they make their own tapes.
Yeah.
By the time they think about doing it professionally, or maybe even find out that you can do it professionally, they've already got some stuff going. But if you're starting from scratch and you're really interested, there's, I would look online for resources. I'm sure there are some. And there's definitely good books and tapes you can get. And, just devour as much as you can and do a lot of it, because that's how you get good.
Thanks so much, Nick, for that advice, man. It was really solid. The thing I want to know is, when you were growing up as a kid, did you have a certain cartoon or cartoon character that you really gravitated towards?
When I was, as far as doing voices and stuff, I didn't so much imitate cartoons. It was more like sort of old British radio shows and stuff like that, and dialects and just sort of real life characters. I'd meet people and I liked their voice and I'd sort of imitate them.
Yeah.
Or I'd come up with these weird characters. I can tell you what I liked, because I loved Rocky and Bullwinkle's.
Oh, yeah.
That stuff was brilliant. The voice was good. There was a lot of great stuff going on. I didn't, it never occurred to me that I was going to do voiceover. It never occurred to me that I would do cartoon voices. But, I look back and, the stuff at Dawes Butler and Mel Blanc, and, it's just genius to this day. It's, it's hard to beat that stuff. So many so many great artists doing that stuff. But I guess to answer your question, it was more like just off the wall humorous stuff and real life stuff and dialects that caught my imagination more than trying to do cartoon voices.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for kind of diving into that. Everyone's inspiration is sometimes a little different. And it's always great to kind of hear what was inspirational, like some of the British radio broadcasts and those different things. And accents have always been something I loved growing up as a kid. But cartoons have also meant a lot to me too. So I appreciate you diving into that for us, Nick.
Yeah, well, I loved cartoons when I was a kid. It's just for some reason I didn't think so much about those voices, with a few exceptions, I guess,
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, it has been awesome chatting with you, man. I have one final question for you today, and we will wrap this up. The question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
God. Boy, this is about the last thing I've ever thought. I don't know. What is a legacy? I mean, what does that mean exactly? I guess I'd have to look it up. Does that mean what people you remember you for?
Yeah, like in 100 years, what do you want people to say about you?
Work.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, let me think. Well, as far as the work I've done, it's hard, I don't even know how to answer that. You stymied me, Trent, and I got to admit, because I don't think enough first. I mean, my thing is to live every day completely 100% and, be passionate and do what you love and try to help people and stuff. But what I would like people to know about me is that I really did pursue my dreams, and I've had a lot of different careers, a lot of different things I've done. I jump around a lot, and that can be a blessing and a curse. Because some people, dedicate their life to playing guitar or whatever, and end up being masters and brilliant at it. Or some people do voiceover and nothing else and absolutely master it. For me, my thing is always, I've always wanted to do more than one thing, and I kind of keep shifting around, and then I'll go back and integrate what I did 10 years ago with what I'm doing now. So, but I guess the point I want to make is that I always, like Joseph Campbell said, followed my bliss,
Yeah.
I did what I wanted to do, and I believed I could do it. And I believed that having the passion for it was not only necessary in order to be any good at it, but it was kind of the whole reason for doing it, So I didn't spend any time doing stuff, or very little time doing stuff I didn't like, or that I wasn't interested in. I've always been able to do things that interest me and sort of grab my passion. I get excited about, and can be creative with. And so I would just, I guess, like people to know that that's possible, that if you think you would want to live that way, I can testify that it's possible,
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your values. And if that's important enough to you that you will, forego, having a huge pile of money that you can count on, or security, or, for me, it's always been, passion about what I do has always been my priority, much more than security or achieving a certain amount of notoriety or anything like that. There's been times in my life where I could have stayed on a certain course and become more quote unquote successful. Like I could have stayed with Foghat, I quit them right when they got big, but I just wasn't interested in doing it anymore. And that's kind of been the way it's been for me. I could have stayed in LA and probably just kept doing what I was doing and getting more jobs and blah, blah, blah. But I wanted to come here to Reykjavik and see what the hell happened. And I tell you, it's the best thing I ever did. So I guess, I don't know if it's a legacy, but my message would be, follow your bliss and don't be afraid, and doors will open where you didn't know there were doors. That's a Joseph Campbell quote that I really believe in.
Well, thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate you diving into your life and your career and the advice and the legacy that you want to leave. And I think, ultimately pretty much what you've said is just follow your heart and, dream your dreams, so That's pretty epic, man. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, Nick, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us a special closeout as Michael Morbius from Spider-Man, the animated series?
So hello, everybody who did that voice. as far as Morbius, it is to the best of my recollection that I did that voice. I was undead during a lot of the time, and being undead affects your memory, so I'm told. So I may not have the recollection, but I remember Felicia very well. I am quite sure that I will always have great passion for Felicia. And I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope that if you become a vampire, you'll enjoy it as much as I did. We're not all so bad. All right, folks. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Nick Jameson, the voice of Michael Morbius. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest, Scott Clifford, the voice of Carnage from the 1994 Spider-Man the Animated Series. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.